sensing energy vampires and perceiving energetic communication, HSP being sensitive clairvoyant. In culture, you are taught that you are a purely physical being and can therefore only perceive such things through physical channels, sound waves, light refraction. Light is also frequencies, but that's something completely natural. Now imagine a turtle, a water turtle, which orients itself to the Earth's magnetic field or the swarming behavior of other animals. So you are actually a wonderfully fine frequency being. I found this wonderful in the years when I was very committed and loving, learning the piano, practicing on increasingly fine instruments, and practicing 4 to 6 hours a day over the course of a day. That's why I also had a teacher, which for me came from the so-called, which is actually the old European piano tradition, the Moscow school, who were in the conservatory in Moscow. And when they have their, Weimar Music Festival days and the like, they always spoke at the workshops about how it's not just about technically clean playing, but about the energy of the piece, or that you should imagine how you spread the energy in the lecture hall, so that it is something that goes away from you. And a pianist then said to me, I harness your energy. It reminds me of how to celebrate effective rituals. I was taught in the same way. When I speak a ritual text, I should imagine how my sound waves, but also what I modulate as heart energy, spread out in the room, as if on a glass plate, into the farthest corner. This is how I direct the energy in the room. And only then does a ritual that really captures people. So again and again, the topic of energy was the physical sound that I produce in the instrument. And at the same time, I should concentrate on a landscape, on colors, on a certain emotion, and I should also modulate it to the sound played, and it should spread out in the room. So I say, wow, what you guys are doing here, this is white magic. So this is a concert, in contrast to one that is played in a technically clean manner, simply what grabs the higher ones. And then we agreed, back then I was still a bit of a mystical show-off kind of person, that I accompany her from a distance in important things, application situations, or a competition matter where she is a violist, for example in a music competition, in an international piano, so that the student of this great professor does well, that I control the energy in the room. Because I thought I could do that. So there is no room for me. And you can then say what resonated with you. Up to the point where I really designed entire concert halls, the energy in the room. That was also a great joy for me to experiment with. Whether I'm just a weirdo, there is an energy independent of my physical presence. And vice versa, when she was, for example, in the Berlin Philharmonic, and I wasn't at the concert, but at my desk in my Berlin apartment, she would call me or text me and ask me to describe to her what kind of piece she was playing. So what the excursion of the piece is like, what the mood is in the hall and the like. And there were a few more text messages in there because I then wrote back, "You're on break right now, nothing is being played, but I can describe to you what's going on with the pianist during the break." So you can see, for me it's now such a normal, actually boring everyday thing that I don't even feel like putting it in the foreground. But then you see from my perspective how I perceive the so-called cultured people as very helpless, at the mercy of their bodies alone. It's like a soldier just having to look around, while others have super modern high-tech search systems, but also frequency weapons. A frequency weapon is something independent of the physical body. But you yourself are, so to speak, a blessed and dear thrower instead of a flamethrower, something like that. But you are also a frequency weapon. If someone hates you intensely, then you can hate them if, for example, you have several people together and they are in sync, so to speak. A ritual is actually just the synchronization of people in good and bad times. And it's like when people march across a bridge in unison. That's what they say. I have no engineering idea that we could then allegedly cause a bridge to collapse through this kind of reinforcement or highly modulated waves? I have no idea. But that's just the difference between an individual and a group that meditates, or a ritual is just a guided group meditation, if it's good. The Protestant Church no longer knows that. So it's always about controlling the frequencies of a group through mass media. Control means, where do I direct attention and what do I command or manipulate that I want people to feel now? And people who find themselves in such a force field, who have no idea, feel and think, oh, now I'm suddenly having a heart attack, or I'm having nightmares, or I'm having panic attacks, but they're just lying in a huge force field. And what I'm doing now, because it's everyday life for me, I've of course been busy with the application level for a long time. I don't just want to scare you, but of course there are always solutions. That's why I used to specifically retreat into a monastery for 2 weeks in silence, because I simply noticed, wow, it's a great atmosphere here. And what I'm doing now, because the climate in Germany is pretty bad, and I can assume that the whole thing will last until the end of 2026, with various shock situations and shock waves. A consistent signal doesn't have an eroding effect at all, but always sine curves of horror with the topics are interchangeable. That's why I offer this. So I'm going to Greece. Who's coming with me? I wouldn't be like that either. Hello? I'm tanned now and in a good mood. That's what you get now, but that I simply say for those who are more tense or almost apathetic, everything is prepared and stuff like that. And then I just know that this island that I'm going to really has a superpower to manifest things. This happens almost immediately. So my own mystics observed that, but also tourists who had also meditated, whom we simply met. They said I was just concentrating on something and imagining it. Happened to me. And that has exactly the opposite effect when the topic is death, an island that is one of the world's blue belt zones. So a lot of people live to be well over 100 years old, happy and healthy, without any special methods or characteristics. So again, that's an energy of a place. And you just use that because it's clear. That's kind of an estimate. 70% of what I feel is not my thing at all. But that's what Zen masters want to teach their students. You are the perceiver and not the perceived. A materialist thinks I am my body. So if I am my body and only have physical channels of perception, what I perceive must have something to do with me. Whereas mystics say, hey, if you see a car, you're not a car. So if you feel hate, it doesn't have to be yours. You only feel it. You are only the perceiver. There are such great sentences from enlightenment systems and religions, but they can rarely translate them into your normal everyday German. To do this, you really have to live in the area yourself. Then you can translate an example. This is something different than just reading. So if you feel hate, you are because of cramps in the heart area, but you are a physical symptom. I think my left knee, maybe the osteoarthritis inside. The interesting thing is, even if you're not a trained mystic, I say, go to your favorite place or hug your favorite tree for a while. Now pay attention. Do you still have the heartbreak? Do you still have the osteoarthritis in your knee? Or does it seem to be gone? And then pay attention who is always close to you when you get arthritis symptoms. This can be something like binge eating or irritable bowel symptoms or really bad symptoms, or headaches or the feeling of migraines in the eyes. In 70% of cases, it could be the person who lives close to you or a lonely mother-in-law who likes to concentrate on you like an energy vampire because it's always so nice to talk to you on the phone. This goes as far as will commands. That's not meant in a bad way, but that's someone who is currently thinking about calling you. You think about the person intensively, even though you really don't really like them and had no reason to do so beforehand. And suddenly she actually calls. So we are Wi-Fi creatures, which is a very healthy thing. And it only seems natural because it's being kept a secret from you. You're being fooled, you're much bigger and more perceptive than you're taught. The opposite is actually the case. Most school systems, that comes from the Prussian military, at least in Germany, Most school systems are designed to ensure that fortunately things have changed a bit in the meantime, but what was needed on the job market at the time, like that industrialization, punctuality, and recipients of orders. So, imagine that you are simply doing something in the classroom that comes to you spontaneously as an impulse of your will. You are disturbing. So by then it will become clear. There are no sadistic teachers, but the system, punctuality, and taking orders. The work systems in which you then work are almost all designed in this way. Imagine at work doing something just because you think it's important. You are disturbing. Yes, you think, if that's already the case in that area, your will is switched off. Or the recipient is working on new German team skills. Do you think they will now tell you something about your finer perception skills? So that you are able to read the boss's thoughts? Or that you say, hey, stop telling me your bullshit. I pretend to be good, but I'm telepathic. I'm going to train my will now and send you my orders. Then you have to see what a powerful being I am. For example, smile at me. You don't have to mean anything bad. It works. And so there are certain circles that use this to further enslave people. These are primarily organizations that are hierarchically organized and that emphasize will, because that is a basic requirement. And then there are the idiots who always just want to open their hearts and unite with you. This is a foolish religion of a subject. Then your warmth as people without self-control always serves the person who tells you, pay attention to me, then you will be rewarded or punished. Reward and punishment are unethical. You are then not a free being unless that is the case. But this is such a guide, because my spirituality is not just isolated, not any method, but the culture is not progressive. Progress means when the individual is free to think, has free will and functioning self-control. Everything else is a highly manipulative, super-veiled act of submission, like letting your mother ask you, totally free. Would you like to do your homework first, then eat spinach, and then play Mikado with me? Great, is not it. I didn't read that. It's just from observing people who come to me. Almost everyone has destroyed wills. Almost everyone has some underlying trauma with great fear or worry, so those who are anxious turn their attention outwards. But the fear is greater in people the weaker their will is. From there, as you control yourself, your fear will decrease. You will notice that the fear is always greatest in the area of your life, where you have the least control, where at some point you suffered such a shock of fainting, where you were so emotionally flooded that you were frozen. And from then on, you are in the mode of just looking and reacting. So it's still a state of shock. I shouldn't be able to do anything. And the frozen person then lives mostly in fantasies instead of saying, I'll try this out, so trial and error. So far, perhaps as an answer, put the whole thing in a larger context. But that's the picture. What does picture mean? Model. First, just put together from perception who you actually are, and where I'm just sitting here like a little antlion under his patch of sand. Who wants to come by here? What do you want to learn from me? But I don't say that so much on YouTube, simply because it's still not popular. So the people who say something like that, hello, there is clairvoyance here. I call it direct empathy on YouTube if you type that in, or kardionosi. These are my least clicked videos, or where I'm considered a weirdo. These are the new means. So your self-worth and your competence are being attacked. So in core values, if you publicly stand by them. This even went against the ears of my psychoanalyst. When I was talking about, I can scan and read people just like that. Even back then I said that, I called it that. Did she think I was just in early stage disorder, or that it was a symbiotic fantasy? Once I swallowed it, you now have a small punishment. The next time I thought, hey old lady, now I'll tell you what you're feeling right now. And that was actually one of those days when she was in a bad mood. Then today I said, I can't really say much. The whole room feels like it's been piled high with packages of her great sadness. You are current about something. Someone can basically be sad or current. You are currently deeply sad about something, and that determines the atmosphere in the room. And that's not my feeling, it's hers. That's when you're trained. What do I think was? What's yours? I was aware of my feelings before I entered the room, and that was a bit of a wild determination. And her anger? Yes. And what did she say? Would you mind keeping your delicate tentacles with you? People don't want proof that clairvoyance works. The one who sees clearly is not at all supernatural, but a person who simply perceives precisely. That's always behind the big phrase coming into the here and now. It's not about fantasizing. It's not about trusting old things. It's not about making fantastic plans about the future. It's about what's happening between you and me right now. And if I don't like the situation here and now, how can I control it? How can I make such an impact that I can get here and there? What do I know financially or personally or health-wise? Yes, and this apparently was completely unimportant in thinking, feeling, and wanting to train. This is simply building a strong, free, self-determined you. If you only have a clear mind, you get stuck in perception. If only you have an open, happy, radiant heart, you can merge wonderfully. But without a will, you can't control anything. Probably again, and not without reason, only the top two things are trained in the spirituality scene. Because taxing means gaining earthly power. Question from person X. But that means I can perceive what you have anchored in my brain as a pattern. Then is it a different kind of perception? Answer. Please explain to me what role the patterns in your brain play for you right now if you mention them. Person X, I think what I experience, for example, is the phenomenon of projection. This is something that is in me, but that I also project in others. But that is something that is in me as a neurological projection. Answer. Oh yes, of course we want to overcome projection. Projections are, so to speak, the blind spots of perception. That's why for me projection is the opposite of perception. A projection is a distorter. When I do brainstorming coaching, one point I look at is, what is your biggest perception distorter at the moment? Fear for some, overwhelming pain for others. That's why they almost always only expect pain and things like that. But these are the distortions that I try to delete so that the perception becomes clear. Question from Person X, that's where hanging on a poor level came in handy. Answer. And that is, of course, the great thing about psychoanalysis, that it already has this topic of projection, perception distortion within the system. But that has nothing to do with perception itself. For example, Evagrios Ponticus died shortly before 400. I call him the early Meister Eckhart. He was in the school of Origens, a super mystic from the 3rd century. He speaks of when the human spirit has become clear and radiant like a sapphire. This is your healthy state when you are not traumatized or overloaded with certain blocked feelings. Most of the time, if they're too bad and the soul can't process them, they sit as muscle tension spread throughout the body or lead to, cramps in the stomach area or in the heart or something like that. These things make you die way too early. You could easily live well into your 80s healthy and happy if these things didn't fit on your body. But because this culture is stupid below average, spiritually, it doesn't even strive for a clear, radiant mind, but actually constantly offers distraction and distraction as its main diet. And there was a theologian who said you can distinguish culture by the type of narcotic it has, or its drug. There are cultures where it is chic to consciously take drugs as enlightenment. I'm not that out of it now, but I guess I don't know what those weird cactus people or mushroom people or bark people do. And then there are cultures, i.e., what is forbidden in the respective culture and what is allowed and encouraged. And then there are cultures that, drink. Alcohol is allowed here. That's what makes people who drink a lot drug them and make them aggressive. In any case, I think that thugs and bullies are probably drunk or something. Yes, Nicotine makes you calm a bit, but you don't realize it is enlightening. Cannabis makes you weak-willed if you take it for too long, but at least it makes you peaceful. So this super peaceful drug was suppressed here for a long time. Yes, just like Bon Mao, thanks. Most of them with severe attachment disorder as their basic trauma. This mother-child relationship, this feeling of being supported, the way I am wanted, or I am wanted at all. Instead of being my parents' fantasy project, I have to become what their values and society's values want me to be. Yes, until you get off again and goodbye with your freedom. In Germany, it's considered a user if you don't get a high school diploma. In Switzerland, they say, my goodness, you don't have to have a high school diploma. Do something as a craftsman or something like that. We can get all this intellectual stuff from Germany. We all want to study, so that's not what I'm praising, but simply children as victims of certain waves of education policy that are currently being represented nationally, instead of the parents then taking a step back and saying, let's just put our child on this education policy assembly line, or let's ask the child again himself. As John Lennon said, no one asked me, do you want to be happy, and how do I become a happy person? So from a mystical point of view, it's quite nice here, but far from progress if you see the happiness and the development potential of the individual as the yardstick. When an individual develops, he doesn't become aggressive. So the blocked person is highly aggressive, frustrated, and develops all these mental poisons. Wonderful.